Welcome to another virtual Live Talks Los Angeles event. We welcome Matthew McConaughey and John Grisham to our series. We invite you to visit our YouTube channel for over 300 conversations much like this. Today they'll talk about Matthew's memoir, Greenlights, and we also will talk about John's new novel, A Time for Mercy. Matthew and John need no introduction. Matthew is the Academy Award-winning actor, storyteller, and philanthropist. John Grisham is the author of 30 novels, one work of nonfiction, a collection of stories, and 6 novels for young readers. Welcome again to both of you. And I thought a great place to start would be, let's hear the story of how you guys first met. Let's start with your version of it, Matthew.
My version of it. And I write about this in the book. It was around somewhere in 95. I'd gotten called in to go meet the director, Joel Schumacher, to look at the role of Freddie Lee Cobb that ended up being played by Kiefer Sutherland. I had read the script, I'd read the book. What I wrote, the role I really wanted was Jake Brigance. So I remember going into that meeting with Joel Schumacher, and I said, at the end of the meeting, I planned this out. I said, well, who's playing the lead of Jake Brigance? He says, I don't know. Who do you think should? And I remember my heartbeat raising a little bit, but I had to plant this line. And I said, well, I think I should. And he laughed. Oh, that's a great idea, but it's never going to happen. Right? You don't have enough things go. You don't have enough star power to get this made this way. But they went on. Some things went my way off screen, and also they were not finding the lead. I think I had understood that Costner was brought up. I had heard a story that Woody was brought up, but they were not agreeing. And obviously, John Grisham had approval of who plays Jake Brigance, because it's very autobiographical, right? So I think everybody was cast, right? The movie was a go, but we have no Jake Brigance yet, and we're a couple of months out. I get called in for a screen test on a Sunday afternoon. And I remember Schumacher saying this. He goes, look, we're doing it over in this little studio off Fairfax. It's because even if you do really well, the studio, you may not get approved. I don't want it to go on your resume that, oh, you tried and failed. So we're going to do it in a quiet place where nobody will kind of know. Well, we went in and did the screen test for the summation. And then I didn't hear anything. And I go away to work on another job, and I believe I meet you the first time over the phone when you call me with Joel Schumacher. I'm in Piedras Negras. It's late at night, and you asked me if I wanted to be Jake Brigance, and I said something to the version of "hell yeah," and it was a short phone call, and then we kind of got to know each other in person after that. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you got to keep in mind though, when the movies of The Firm, The Pelican Brief, and The Client came out in the span of 12 months. From the summer of 93, summer of 94. And then Rainmaker came out with a young Matt Damon in 95. And I would not sell the film rights to Time to Kill. And Joel, who directed The Client, really wanted to do the movie. And he came to Oxford, Mississippi, where we were living. We walked around the square, and I said, can we film it here? It's a beautiful, picturesque town square. We had all these conversations. And I finally sold the film rights to New Regency with Joel directing. And Joel, being Joel, he lined up a cast that included Samuel Jackson, Sandra Bullock, Kiefer Sutherland. Oh my gosh, I can't even think of all of them. Just a great cast. Oliver Platt, and they didn't film it in Oxford. They were in a town called Canton, Mississippi, where they filmed it. And they had this zillion-dollar cast. Full production crew, 100 people on the ground, and they were ready to go. They didn't have Jake, okay? And Joel was getting kind of panicky, and Joel, he mentioned that he never gave me the name of Costner, but their names were flying about. And so, and I had the right to, approve Jake. And things were getting tense, and because they need to start filming. I mean, could you imagine Samuel Jackson sitting around, in rural Mississippi with nothing to do because we don't have a star? Mm-hmm. And even the lawyers got involved. The lawyers are going back and forth, and my lawyer said, yeah, read the contract. We have the right to approve. And in the midst of all this, Joel, being Joel, and he was great, he said, time out. He said, let's stop yelling. I got a guy in mind. I know this guy. And I said, Joel, I trust you, okay? Who is it? He said, well, you probably don't know him. I'm going to get him in. I'm going to pull him in from somewhere else for a screen test. And he did. And it was back in 1995. So we had the old VHF cassette tapes. They FedExed it to us. And Renee and I were in the kitchen waiting on FedEx to show up. We got the tape, popped it in the machine, and there was Matthew. And he's kind of smoking a cigar. He's got the right accent, the Texas Southern drawl. And Renee said, I'm in love. And we loved Matthew being Jake. And I walked straight to the phone and called Joel. And I said, Joel, this is our guy. And Joel was very relieved. Then we called Matthew and said, hey, buddy, get your butt to Canton, Mississippi to do this movie. And that's what happened.
Boom. Yeah. I love hearing. I haven't heard your version. It's pretty close to what I remember, but that's great to hear the inside scoop from your side too.
And there was a lot of reluctance because Matthew was not well known. It was a big movie, obviously, with a big budget, big bestseller. And the fact that we were giving the movie to somebody who was unknown became kind of part of the story. This guy's big chance. He's starting off with a big movie, and that became the story. And then when the movie came out and we saw what a great job Matthew did, everybody fell in love with him and the book all over again. And it was a huge movie. That's how it happened.
Boom.
So, John, when you wrote A Time to Kill, you were still practicing law and based the novel on an actual case. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for the book and Jake?
Yeah, well, Jake is very autobiographical. At the time, I was living in that small town in Mississippi. I was practicing law. I had a pretty young wife who was having babies, and I was trying to scratch out a living like 40 other lawyers around the square. And, it was pretty stiff competition. Tough to make a living, a good living as a small town lawyer in the Deep South. And this is 1985 or so when I started writing. And I was dreaming of the big case, the big courtroom drama, the big trial where I would be in the center of it and win. That's what young lawyers dream of. I was spending a lot of time in the courtroom. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I wanted the courtroom experience. So I took a lot of court-appointed cases, a lot of criminal cases, and I was just in the courtroom. And I happened to be in a courtroom one time when I saw something that changed my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but there'd been this terrible rape in our community, and they caught the guy, and he was a bad dude. He'd been in prison. He got out, and within days he'd raped. Anyway, there's a lot of talk about what her father might do. Again, this is 1985, and there was a lot of he had a lot of support. There were a lot of people who wanted him to get his own brand of retribution. I knew the father. I didn't know him well. But he had a big family and nice guy, but not the kind of guy you'd start trouble with. And so this kind of seethed and festered for a while and then kind of went away. And a few months later, they brought this guy to trial. And there was a lot of security around the courthouse, a lot of rumors about what the family might try to do. It's a pretty tense situation. And so I was in the courtroom because I was an officer of the court, local lawyer. I could hang out in the courtroom. And her testimony, she was 12 years old. Her testimony was going to be so brutal and just gut-wrenching that the judge, my mentor, the judge I practiced under, very wise old guy, he cleared the courtroom, made everybody leave the courtroom, which is extremely unusual. I've never seen it since. But again, I was an officer of the court, so I could stay in the courtroom and watch. I was very nosy. It was going to be high drama. And he put a deputy around the doors. All the spectators were gone. Nobody was in the courtroom but the jurors, a few clerks, me, the prosecutor, the defendant, his lawyers, and that was it. And they brought her in to testify. And so she testified for about an hour. And she took us through every emotion known to the human soul. Hatred, love, revenge, you name it. Sympathy. There were times when there were no dry eyes in the jury box. Most of us were trying to hide our faces because our eyes were wet. It was just a very emotional. I've never seen anything like that before. And finally, after about an hour, she could not continue. And the judge, we were all worn out. And the judge said, let's take a recess. And I knew 3 ladies on the jury, and I was staring across the courtroom at the jury box. And as soon as he called for a recess and banged his gavel, I sprinted out of the courtroom. Everybody wanted to leave the courtroom. And I got all the way to my car downstairs on the square outside the courthouse. And I'd left my briefcase in the courtroom. That's how rattled I was. So I had to go back in the courthouse, up the back stairs, through the side door to get my briefcase. And I walked into the courtroom, and there was a defendant sitting there all by himself with one other person in the courtroom. That was a deputy assigned to kind of guard him. He wouldn't go anywhere. And I walked right by him to get my briefcase. And I had this thought, had that been my daughter, I would give me a gun, and I would do what every member of the jury wanted to do. And I would do it, and I would stand and look at that jury and say, now, what are you going to do with me? And there was just this, this thought that became an obsession, that became even more of an obsession. I'd never written before, but I thought, I'll change a few facts here. And this could be a very dramatic story. And that's the first thing I'd ever written in my life as far as fiction. And 3 years later, the book was finished and didn't know what to do with it. Got a break here, got it published, and it became A Time to Kill.
So that's the first one you wrote, but 4 other of your books, or you say 3 or 4, got made before into films before Time to Kill.
What happened, Matthew? Time to Kill came out in 1989, the first time. A very small, unknown press in New York. I was unknown, of course. I was 34 years old. Never published anything. And the book they printed 5,000 hardback copies, and the book was a flop. I mean, it sold around Memphis where I live, but didn't sell anywhere else. And I told Renee, I said, I spent 3 years on this book. It's not going anywhere. I'm going to write one more book. And if the second book doesn't work, you can forget this secret hobby. I'll just be a lawyer and sue people. That's what I'm supposed to be doing anyway. And the second book was The Firm. And when The Firm hit in 91, everything changed. My overnight success was not quite as dramatic as yours because movies are so much, more visual and bigger. But mine was pretty quick too. And when The Firm came out, then the movie Pelican Brief and those things came out, 93, 94, 95, and things were really crazy back then.
Matthew, before we talk a lot about your memoir, but you early in your career, you wanted to be a lawyer, right?
That's what I thought I was going to be, for sure.
And why did you want to be that? And I'm just also curious, did that have anything to do with your attraction to wanting to play this role?
Sure. Well, first of all, look, I wanted to be a lawyer because I was going to be good at it, because that's what my family was telling me I was good at. They started off at an early age. Well, the youngest one sure can argue a point. Geez, he won't give up a point in the household. That was sort of became the lingo. Geez, oh man, he won't quit arguing. He won't quit. Okay. I would outlast my parents or brothers on certain points and have really good. We'd all in our family get our chance to stand up on the chair and make our point. And I liked it, and I liked debating. And I was debating in high school as well. So it became sort of the lingo in my family was, Matthew, you go be the lawyer. And then my dad would say yeah, and you'll defend the family business, down the line. So I head off to University of Texas at Austin thinking that I'm going to go to law school as I'd always wanted to. And it wasn't until the end of my sophomore year that I wasn't sleeping well with the idea of finish school here, go to law school for a few more years, get out, try and find a job. You really won't be having an imprint in life until your 30s. And I didn't really like the idea of spending my 20s just getting educated in something. And I switched over, went to film school. Now I get to meet a John Grisham years later and play that defense attorney. Now, did it have anything to do with why I wanted to do it? No, I would have done anything to do the film. Now, it did enrich, I think, my experience of maybe what I could have brought to what I brought to the role. One thing I remember a process that I've always enjoyed that I practice with this is understanding, for your defense attorney, really understand the prosecution stance even better than they do. And it can expose things in your defense that you wouldn't otherwise. It's knowing the other person's game plan, actually sitting morally in their position and going, you know what, they've got a real good point here. They may be right. Yes, it's their truth. Let me sit in their truth, the opposition's truth, to better understand mine, whether I'm a defense attorney or prosecutor, which here defense. And I enjoyed that through this process. I mean, you know, I was comfortable also in a courtroom. A courtroom felt like it always felt like a comfortable stage for me personally to be in, to be able to tell the story with 12 people listening, to paint the pictures. And look how it was written so well. And you do it again in A Time for Mercy. Jake paints the picture, puts the juror in that place, the where, makes them very uncomfortable with the ugliness, as you say. And just as they get so uncomfortable, you pull them out to objectively look back in and go, now, as you said, what would you do if it was me? Now, what would you do? And on that reverb is where you seem to get them. And Jake seems to get them in a closing argument. But paint the picture, give it context. And A Time for Mercy, where you said the prosecutor tried to bring everything down to the last 10 seconds. And it teed Jake up for the last 10 years. Their life led to this moment. Their entire experience with this man led to this moment to do what you did. And you did that. It's a similar version of storytelling with Jake's final summation in Time to Kill.
So, Matt, a question for you. How'd you get from Texas? You said film school after Texas. How'd you get your first speaking role in Hollywood? What was it?
Well, so between my junior and senior year in college in the University of Texas, I go to the right bar at the right time. Take my girlfriend out, go up there to go get free drinks because the guy behind the bar is working and he's in my film class. He says there's a guy at the end of the bar. He's in town producing a film. I go introduce myself. He's Don Phillips. Hey, I'm in town and I'm producing this film called Dazed and Confused. You might be right for a part. Sure, I'd love to. You ever done any acting? Yeah, I was in the middle of that commercial for that long. All right, great. Show up at this address tomorrow morning and have a look at the script. I go pick up the script. It's got 3 lines. I go work on those 3 lines. I come back. I read for it. I get the part. 3 lines. I get called to work that summer in Austin on the film Dazed and Confused, turned into 3 weeks work. So I finished that up, getting paid $320 a day, loving what I'm doing. People are patting me on the back, telling me I'm good at it. Now I go back to film school to graduate my senior year. So after I finished graduating, that film Dazed and Confused comes out. So I pack up my U-Haul and drive out about 2 weeks after Dazed and Confused opened up. And that got me in meetings to go find an agent and to sort of have my name on the map. Okay.
Joel, when he called me, he said, "Have you seen the movie Dazed and Confused?" I said, "No, I haven't seen that one." but after I met you, I went back and watched the movie. It's hilarious.
We're actually doing a read through of it here in a couple of days. Yeah, classic.
What was the movie after Time to Kill?
After Time to Kill, correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, I believe, does it go Newton Boys Contact Amistad or Newton Boys Amistad Contact? I believe right after that. Yeah, Time to Kill opened up,
summer of
for
90s.
me. I think it's either with Spielberg and Amistad. I go back and work with Linklater and Newton Boys, and then I go work with Robert Zemeckis on Contact. Yeah, really, after A Time to Kill, I had so much. I've told this story, but that weekend before A Time to Kill, mind you, there was momentum leading up that I could feel, people could feel that we think this is going to work. We think McConaughey worked in this movie. We think the movie works. We think it will be successful. You can feel it. The studio puts a lot of power behind it, and publicity goes. At the same time, nobody knew. So before that weekend, there's 100 scripts out there that I'd love to do any of them, because yesterday I couldn't do any of them. And now I'd love to do all of them. And before that film came out, it was like, well, you can do one of them, but the other 99 you cannot. Boom, cut to Monday morning after that week, opening weekend, inverted. Oh, that 100? You can do 99 of them. There's only one you can't, but maybe you can do that one too. And I was like, whoa. And I remember going, I need more than 24 hours in a day, but I don't think they're given anymore. And I remember trying to wrangle that, the amount of options that were thrown my way over a weekend was just a complete inversion. It was pretty wild.
I love the story from your book where you go to the same coffee shop you go to all the time and nobody even looks at you, okay? And you walked in after the opening of A Time to Kill and everybody stops and stares at you and you said, hey, I must be famous.
Yeah, it hit me.
It was just that way. It was just that way.
It happened that quick.
Joel and I went to, they invited us to go to New York. I think it was ABC morning show. And we were talking about A Time to Kill. And all they wanted to talk about was Matthew. And it was just hilarious stories. I mean, the movie was still out. It was, number one. And suddenly you're the most famous guy on the planet. And they wanted to talk to us about, both of us took full credit for finding you, by the way. But that was Joel, we had so much fun with it.
Yeah, it was a heck of a ride for sure. We lost Mr. Schumacher here this year. Yeah, he was special, and you brought it up early on, John. Boy, what a casting director. What an eye. You look at some of the talent he's found that broke out via his eye. Really, really a great resume on that. And Schumacher. Yeah, he's smiling right now. He's laughing. Oh, y'all stop it. I can hear him.
I didn't see him for 20 years. And we were, Renee and I checked in the Mercer Hotel in Soho about 2 years ago for something in New York. And across the reception room, the dining area, I hear this guy called out my name. He recognized Renee, and it was Joel. And we kind of lost touch after he bailed out on a movie called Runaway Jury, and postponed that movie for a long time. It wasn't my movie, but we kind of lost touch after that. And I really regret the fact that I did not keep up an active correspondence with Joel because he's just such a warm, friendly, great guy. And I didn't know he was sick until I saw his obituary.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah, I didn't either. I did not either. He did something really, really, really incredible with me. Now, look, here I am. I come in. I've never taken acting classes, even at this point. And I get this major lead role in this major motion picture studio film. And I'm coming in, and I can feel it. I got a few people coming up to me going, hey, you okay? Hey. But then you can tell, then we work a few weeks on the film, things are going well. You start to feel the studio heads show up, they feel confident, they've been seeing the dailies, the things are working well. I think they're working well. And, you can kind of tell like, hey, well, let's not tell him it's going really well yet. Let's not say it because we don't want to think, let him stay in his bubble, whatever it is, And there were times when if I would ever get in trouble or be lost in a scene or not know where I was, here's what Joel continually said to me, which is an awesome thing to say to a young actor who's got to carry a movie, especially. He kept going, he's you. You're him. You are Jake Brigance. That's it. Don't make it anyway. That's why John and I cast you. That's because we want you. You're the character. That's it. How do you feel about it? He never went further than that. He kept pounding that into me. And looking back, and even during the time, I think I noticed that was the perfect direction to tell you. We cast you for a reason. Yeah. How do you feel, Matthew? You are Jake Brigance. Jake Brigance is you. You don't need to get out of yourself to think about, oh, how would I do this? No, you are here for a reason. Wonderful, wonderful identity and power that he gave me with that direction.
Let's get into the memoir. It's a non-traditional memoir, and John, you've probably seen lots of memoirs come across your desk for blurbs. So I'd like you to weigh in also. But Matthew, how did the idea for how this developed? I mean, you say it's not a traditional memoir. It's not about nostalgia. It's not an advice book. You call it an approach book.
Yeah.
Tell us how that came together, and I understand a lot of this came from a diary and diaries you kept, a journal you kept for 30 some years.
Journals I've kept for over 36 years. Yeah, I've been jotting stuff down, sights and scenes, felt and figured outs, cools and shamefuls, embarrassments and victories since I was about 14, I guess. And in the beginning, like most people with a diary, I would only run to it when I was lost. Later on in my early 20s, I started to realize, hey, run to it when you're found as well. Start dissecting your successes as well as your failures and when you're feeling lost. And then started to write short stories, kept a diary on every film I've ever done, and throughout my life. And I've always written things down on a beer coaster, napkin, my arm, whatever I could find before you could write it down on a phone. And I kept all of them. And I've had them in a treasure chest for years. And I've taken that treasure chest has been one of those things where you go, well, if the house burns down, please get the cat and the dog in that treasure chest. You know, it was one of the things I was like, I want that. They were all ziplocked up in Ziploc bags in case I was ever at a place where there's a flood or what have you. And I've always had them with me next to where my proverbial desk of wherever I sat down and made my office. And I'd always been looking at them, kind of daring myself to open them up and look back. But I never had the courage to do so. I thought, you know what, I'll move on. My wife or a good friend will open them up, have a read, and if something's worthy in there, maybe they'll share it. And that was a cop-out. And I think about 2 years ago, it hit me. That treasure chest started barking at me, and I had a little time off. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she, like the great woman she is, looked over there and she goes, well, you know what you got to do? Pack up the car, take that treasure chest, get the hell out of here, and don't come back until you got something. So I headed off to the desert with those diaries to go open them up and see what the heck they were. What I found out was all of them, there were 8 categories that everything laid into. There were stories, people, places, prescriptions, poems, prayers, and a whole lot of bumper stickers. So those were my pillars. Now, as I start going through those, I start to find this central theme about how I had found my frequency along the way, how I had manipulated and engineered Greenlights, ease, proceed. I had teed myself up. I was kind to my future self in ways that I had engineered. I found ways that Greenlights fell in my lap. I got lucky. I don't know where they came from. The divine order. You know, how I ended up getting a time to kill job. There's some things that happen outside of my control that went my way and helped me get that role. But I've had many of them through life. I've had times where I saw, oh, you know what? You got a green light in your life there because you endured the situation. You had more resilience. You prepared. You worked harder. You hustled more. I said the other times I caught green lights in my life because I backed away and I pivoted. And I said, no, you know what? I'm going to approach this a different way. And then other times I caught green lights because I waved the white flag and said, nope, I'm going to live to fight another day. I'm going to fight another battle. So the more personal it got for me, the more I started to notice that, oh, you know what? This, I got a book here, Greenlights, that can be objectively looked at. That this is actually, the way I say it in writer's terms, John, the more I went into the subjective I, the more I started to realize it was about the royal we. It was about the human experience. That, oh, these aren't just, yes, these are specific to me, but I think anybody can see these and go, oh, I've got a situation in my life right like that. Or, oh, I've got a story in my own life like that where I ran into a red or yellow light in my life. And how did it reveal itself to be green later on in life or then? Or how did I make it green? Or how did I get lucky? Because the basis of it is, we all could use a little something to find our frequency from time to time. And I've calibrated and recalibrated many times and will continue to do so. And so that's how the book came about. Now I got it between 2 hardcovers and here we are.
Matthew, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. What I admire about the book is how personal you made it. I couldn't do that. I don't have a lot of stuff. You know, I've never kept diaries. I keep daily notes and things like that, but nothing really profound or personal or deep or, you know, I'm not sure even if I have those feelings, I have those thoughts, I have those stories, I have things I would like to maybe one day put in a memoir, but I'm not there yet. It takes a certain amount of courage to be able to lay yourself out there the way you did. Were you intimidated by it?
I was initially intimidated because I thought I'm not one for looking back. I don't like nostalgia. I like to do things, move on, that's done. mark it off. And I'm not one to chase down my history. I'm not one to really chase down and look down to see how my lineage is connected to where I am and where I'm going. Because I'm always just thinking about moving forward. So it was intimidating because one, I thought I'd look back and I'd be embarrassed about some things. I thought I might be shameful about some things. I thought I'd feel guilty about some things. I thought it might be damn boring. And I thought I might see places where I was just, oh, geez, that was really arrogant. And that was maybe just boring. The things I thought I'd be embarrassed about, most of those I ended up laughing at. And I also noticed that as much as I thought I was going to have a little bit of, geez, this is boring. What were you thinking? Yeah, no crap, McConaughey. Of course you're writing about that. Duh. I'd look back and I was like, oh, that's an interesting questions you were having there. That's interesting answers you were seeking. And you know what? You're pretty much the same man at 50 as you were at 14. You're still asking the same questions. Hopefully I've evolved the questions a bit, but you're still interested in the same things in life. So I went away with them. I laughed. I cried. And I had probably the best time with myself that I've ever had with those books. And it was a total of 52 days of solitary confinement with the diaries. And I was forced to look at my lineage. I got connected with the last 50 years of my life. I better understand why I'm here right now. I have a clearer view of where it is I want to go because I look back and saw and revealed the thread and saw the thread of how I got here. And I enjoyed looking back more than I thought I would. And I also found out that I have actually remembered more than I thought I forgot.
52 days in the desert?
It was 5 different places. The first, there's about 30 of those days in the desert. The first 12 were solid, were no electricity, just let's go see what I've got in paper and try to find some sort of categorical sort of structure here of what it is. And I don't know if you've ever done this. Do you have this, John? I had an expectation for what I thought they would be. And I felt my first 4 days of looking at those diaries, trying to lean it into what I thought it was going to be. And it wasn't until the 4th night where I was like, we got to have more freedom here. You got to look at what you got and see what it is before trying to make it what it is. And it turned out to be something different than I thought it was. I didn't have any idea that the stories were as fun and revealing and had lessons within them as much as I think they do. I forgot I'd written all that poetry and written down prayers and prescribes along the way. So it turned out to be more philosophical than I thought it was going to be. I actually thought it was going to be more academic. And I actually don't think the book's academic at all. I think it's got some prescriptions for how to approach situations that you could call academic, but it had more poetry and philosophy in it than I expected it to.
It's deeply personal, and that's what I admire about it. You took guts to lay yourself out like that.
Oh, thank you. I remember this goal early on. There's the first line I wrote down after that 4th night of realizing, let's just see what it is. And I said, all right, I'm coming into this writing somewhat of a memoir, a narrative of my life, and I'm a celebrity. Okay. Something kind of obvious about that. And at the same time, I said, okay, that gives me a platform to get it out there inherently in some form, to some extent. And I said, but my goal is to may the words on the page be worthy of being shared if they're written and signed by anonymous. But at the same time, after you read it, you go, only McConaughey could have wrote that. And I remember that being my sort of North Star to try and hope that I ended up at, where, you know what, if you were McConaughey or famous or not, there's something I'm getting out of this. And then go, yeah, but only you could have wrote it. That was the sort of the North Star I was aiming at as a writer.
Good stuff, man.
Matthew, something that struck me about you is you're into taking trips. There are these journeys. There was the one to the Amazon. There was the one in the
Mali,
in the trail, right?
The trailer park living, yeah.
Right. What's the draw to trips? Where do you think that comes from?
I call them, they're versions of a walkabout. I've had a pretty good, when I look back at my life, I've had a pretty good threshold and a trigger for when I feel like I need to go out into some form of solitude and spend some time with just me, to let memory catch up, to see how I feel about something, to let what's going on in my head more communicate better with my heart, my insides, and my instincts, and my gut. And that's hard to do when you're living an affluent, busy, high frequency life and becoming famous, and you've got movies and you love to work and you love to stay busy, which I do. And I'm pretty good on autopilot, which I've had to go on autopilot sometimes, you know. I've had to go by, I've had to, you know, do that at times in my career. And then sometimes we all do. You just go, I got to put the hammer down. I just got to work. I don't have time to go really do inventory on myself right now. That would be a luxury at many times in our lives. But I've had a pretty good trigger for when I go, you know what, you need to get out of here, McConaughey. You need to step outside to better understand where you are. You need to leave what you know to find out what you know. You need to go listen to yourself. You need to go spend some time where you're uncomfortable with your own company, McConaughey, and have the prudence to stick through it, because you will get on the other side of that. So that's been a pretty consistent practice of mine. I've chosen to do that a lot of times on my own. I've also had people that I love in my life that are friends and family that have reminded me, hey, you need to get out of here. You need to go spend some time with you and your thoughts, and you need to go get some clarity right now.
John, how do you write? What's your routine?
It's fairly disciplined. Writers are notorious for, missing deadlines, and not just by weeks or months, but by years. And writers are notorious for, drinking too much and pretty wild lifestyles, undisciplined lifestyles, and things like. Yeah, that's what those are the writers we like to talk about, the famous ones. But it's fall now, and I start a new legal thriller every year on January the 1st, and I give myself 6 months to write the book, January through the 1st of July, and I've learned how much writing I can do in January, February, and March, the winter months, and I get a lot of work done then. And I'm always on time with the deadline. I try to be a few days early just for the hell of it. And once I turn it in, it takes about 6 weeks to get it, edited and polished and ready to go. And then normally they publish it in October in time for the Christmas rush. 1/3 of all books are sold at Christmas time, so the big publishers want the big writers to come out in the fall, late fall. And so that's my routine. What normally happens, or has been happening lately, once my kids all grew up and I no longer coach Little League baseball or anything else, by Labor Day I'm bored and I go write something else. I've written books for kids and sports books and other things. But yeah, I'm 30 years in now to the career, and I I'm kind of learned that you have to work by myself. Matthew, you talk about being alone, having to get away, and I can understand that with what you do, because when you're working and when you're in that world, you get so much attention. And the thing about being a writer, if you want to, you get no attention. You work isolated. You don't have to. I don't have to publish or I don't have to promote or tour or anything else if I don't want to. But I do a little bit of it. But I'm isolated for several hours every day, and I've just gotten accustomed to that. People have asked me, how has COVID affected your writing? I went into isolation 30 years ago. I'm isolated. I come out when I need to each day, but I treasure the first few hours of every morning when I write. I'm all alone. Nobody else is in the room. There's no music. There's no phone, fax, internet. There's no racket. There's nothing. It's very tranquil, quiet. A dark room. This is not the office, but it's something I still, after 40 books or 45 books, I still look forward to tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, going to my office with a very strong cup of coffee and staring at the screen and just being able to work on what I'm working on. I feel very lucky. Matthew feels we're very lucky to be where we are in life and to do what we love to do.
Do you have an outline? Do you have an idea the night before, what those fingers are going to first type or write at 7 a.m. that next morning? Do you have an outline of where you're going? Are your characters speaking to yourself and you're listening to them and writing from there? And I bring this up, I know from my experience that I found in writing this one was, if I could get the first line, and sometimes that's what took me hours in the morning, that first one. And I may not happen till noon, but boy, as soon as I cracked the rhythm of that one line, for the rest of the story just went whoop, and it just wrote it and kind of just ripped and wrote it. But I had to get the rhythm, the cadence, the feel and smell and taste of that first line.
I get the rhythm. The rhythm is very important because when you write suspense or thrillers or whatever, the pacing is crucial because pages have to turn. It's popular fiction, okay? It's not heavy literature. And so the first thing I do at 7 o'clock is I read slowly what I wrote the day before, and I edit, I tune that up, I make changes, and that's probably 1,000, 2,000 words on a good day. But getting back into the story the next morning, that takes about 30 minutes or so. It really gets you in the rhythm to write that day. I work off of an extensive outline. One of my rules for writing popular fiction is do not write the final scene until you know. Do not write the first scene until you know the last scene. If you know the last scene, and writers are notorious for having these brilliant story ideas, and you jump off the cliff and you're writing like crazy, and you write 50,000 words, and 8 months go by, and you stop because you don't know how to end it. You've written yourself in a corner. That happens to veteran writers all the time. And I'm not going to waste time like that. I learned when I was writing A Time to Kill, I learned a couple of very valuable lessons. It took me 3 years to write it. And several times I put it down. I was a busy lawyer. I was in the state legislature. I had, life was busy. I didn't have time to write. But I realized if I didn't make myself write at least 1 page a day, it was not going to happen. And I've told students there, until you're writing 1 page a day, nothing is going to happen, and you're not serious about the writing. And if you write a page a day, preferably same time, same spot, same cup of coffee, whether 15, 20, 30 minutes, write that 1 page. If you have time to write more, fine. But you got to write 1 page a day. In the span of a year, you've written almost a book. Right. And most writers don't publish a book every year or 2 years. It takes 3 or 4. But you got to make yourself do it every day. And that's the best advice I've ever given to any aspiring writer. It's like a lot of things in life, Matthew. Whatever you're trying to do in life, if you can do a little bit every day, it adds up, piles up.
Right, and there's a discipline to that, and there's a responsibility to that. And for me, I find, and I write about this in the book, that in ways that the responsibility gives us freedom. That write 1 a day. You don't have to go write the whole book right now. Don't put the pressure on it. One a day. Just chip away. Just keep swinging the axe at the tree, and try to enjoy that process. Look forward to that 7 a.m. Enjoy the process of being stuck, of going, geez, I don't know what to write next. Enjoy that part, I think, as well. You say know the ending before you start. And I write about this in the book about our life's our resume, that we're writing our eulogy. Our eulogy, when we move on, we will be introduced by someone else for the rest of time. Begin with the end in sight. What's for a movie? I've always done this. I like to go to people before we're doing, okay, so we're in pre-production. What would the poster be? What's it kind of look like? What's it kind of feel like? Just give me an idea of kind of where we're going. I don't just stick to it, but I want to know, kind of give me a feel of where we're going. I always love to see, let's drop a poster for the film, an image, a 1 line, maybe, ideally just an image. It's nice when it gets it all down to just an image, but let's have a look at that. And then before we even start the process of telling the story, I write about, Leah, can we live a life? I think it's a choice we have to make every day. Can we live a life? Can we make choices every day that will look forward to looking back? And it kind of goes back to answering your question a while ago about how I was very intimidated to go look back. And, happy to say a lot of it, was happy with what I saw. There was still some stuff that I was like, oh, you kind of bogeyed there, McConaughey, but okay, we still got time. But yeah, I think that's a good question for all of us to ask. You know, can we live in a way that we can look forward to looking back?
Yeah.
Why don't we look back a little bit, Matthew? Let's go back to your childhood. Tell us about your relationship with your parents and your siblings.
A lot of love in our family from the get-go. The love was never in question. Um, we were a very close family. My two older brother, I've got two older brothers. Oldest brother's 16 years older than me. My middle brother, Pat, who's 6 years older than me, was my oldest brother's 10-year-old birthday present because he wanted a little brother for his birthday. So mom and dad went and adopted him. Mom and dad were married 3 times, divorced twice to each other. They moved probably 50 times for Pop and Pop just trying to find work. Dad's from Patterson, Mississippi. Mom's from Altoona, New Jersey. I just found that out last year because she's always said she was from Trenton, New Jersey. And one day I found out last year she was from Altoona. And I said, Mom, you're from Altoona? She goes, but you always said Trenton. She goes, yeah, but I mean, who the hell would want to be from a place called Altoona? So I've been saying, so I'm from Trenton. As you see through the book, my mother is the queen of relativity, very much an outlaw thinker. My family, I've always thought that my parents, part of the reason they voted, red down the line was to keep all the other outlaws off their territory. We were a disciplined family. My dad was very much a disciplinarian. He wanted to make sure his boys turned into men. He believed in rites of passage, initiations, I remember the first reasons I ever got sort of my backside whooped. It was for saying I can't. I remember saying I can't get the lawnmower started. He goes, you what? I said, I can't get it started. Oh man, that just made my father grovel. He then went on to come help me get the lawnmower started because the tube for the gas flow was not connected. And then as he started it, after I'd gotten in trouble, he goes, see, son, you were just having trouble. Whoa. He really instilled values through his discipline. Second time I got in big trouble, got my backside whooped, was for saying, I hate you to my brother. It was at my birthday party. And my mom stopped the entire party. And I just heard this line at school, and I thought it would be kind of racy and more mature, cool to throw it out there. Oh, I hate you. Well, I found out real quickly you don't throw that word around, and there are consequences for that. I remember these stories of discipline in my family as the love stories. Like, they were painful times. I was never hurt, but it was hurt enough for me to cry, from the pain to get my backside whooped. But I very quickly and later in life look back and was like, oh, but look what you got in trouble for. You got in trouble for saying I can't. You got in trouble for saying I hate. And the other one was just getting in trouble for lying. So I was like, oh, you earned those discipline. You got values from that discipline, Matthew. Like I said, you could cuss and you might get your mouth washed out with soap. But if you said I can't, I hate, or you lied, you got in real trouble. And I look back at that as in great adoration. And those are really through the book. It's actually the love stories I tell, and I hope the humanity comes out, because some of the stuff on the page, if you were just reading the facts, your hand might go to your mouth and you might go, oh my God, he was so abused. No, there was no abuse. It was the love was always there. We were raised on this thing. I love you. I may not like you right now, but I love you. And that was always a good one. The love was never in question in our family. And we don't hold grudges. There's another rule. You cannot hold a grudge. I remember the reason my family liked more of a corporal discipline of getting whooped or something instead of grounding. I remember coming one day going, well, can't you just ground me? My friends get in trouble and they get grounded. And I remember my mom going, nope. I said, why? She goes, because grounding is taking up one of your most valuable asset, time. This way, we just get it over with and we go on. We're not going to take your time. It's like, okay, geez, That's some good. All right, that's your logic. Let's go.
Matthew, talk about the trip to Australia.
Yeah.
There's a lot fascinating about the whole idea that you took the trip and then what happened there, and elements of that you think may have shaped you
Sure. So I'm 2 weeks out. I graduate high school, and I graduate high school. I'm rolling. I mean, I've made straight A's. Mom and dad are happy. I'm 18, which in my family means if you hadn't learned it yet, you're not going to learn it. I got my freedom, no curfew. My car's paid for. I got a job. I got $45 in my pocket, and this is 1988. I'm dating the best looking girl at my school and across town. I got a 4 handicap in golf. I just won most handsome in school. I mean, I'm just rolling. And like everybody, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't know where I wanted to go to school. And my mom had this idea, well, what about an exchange student? And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Sounds like an adventure. There were 2 openings, Australia and Sweden. I said, okay, English speaking, beaches, Elle Macpherson, I want Australia. So boom. Next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Australia. And I'm told I was going to live on the outskirts of Sydney, which turned out to be about 3 hours away from there. Very much not in Sydney, very much not on the beach, very far away from any Elle Macpherson, and still English speaking, but very much a small town in the country, a population of 305 people. Well, very early on in my life, that Australian trip, the brakes were hit. All those things that I just told you I was rolling with were gone. Not only did I not have my car, girlfriend, money in my pocket, a job, mom, dad, and I had a curfew. This family put a curfew on, a very early one. It was very hard. At the same time, I would not be sitting here with the life I'm living if I did not have that year, because that year is what forced me to introspection. That year forced me into inventory. I call it a forced winter. And it was in the middle of July. We're in a version of a forced winter right now with COVID. Everyone is. And what do you do in the winter? You hibernate. You take inventory. You go to your own proverbial church, whether you like it or not. You are stuck with yourself. And I was isolated. I didn't think I was losing my mind. I look back at my diaries from Australia. Yeah, no, I wasn't losing it, but it was loose on the chassis. I'll tell you that. But I wrote. So when I really got serious about writing, I wrote letters, mainly to myself. It was Socratic dialogue. I'd write myself 14, 15, 16-page letters and then return those letters to myself. I had to work things out on my own. I didn't have anything to rely on. And it was a year I found my identity because I was forced to find it on myself. And I don't think I would have found my identity or who I was at that time if I wouldn't have been isolated, or if I wouldn't have taken the chance to go to a foreign land and be in a foreign place and be stuck alone. And it ended up being quite a comical year, but it was quite a colorful year where I had to make some stands on my own without anybody else or any crutch or safety net to rely on. And I needed that. It was a sort of a rite of passage into my own manhood.
We could talk forever here. There's a lot to uncover, but let's go to some of the audience questions. First one is for John. A woman says, I've read every one of John's books. I want to know a little bit about A Time for Mercy and why you brought Jake back.
Jake first appeared in 1989 in A Time to Kill. My version, Matthew's version, was 1996 on film. I waited until 2013 to bring Jake back for a novel because I didn't have a story. When A Sycamore Road came out in 2013, we were pleasantly surprised at the reception, the popularity of Jake, the book sales. And so I thought to myself, well, I should do this more often. And so I waited for a story. You can't write till you have a story. And I waited and finally had a story for Jake to be back in the courtroom in a big murder trial in Clanton, his hometown. And the case, it's not even a murder mystery. You know in the first chapter who kills who and why. And the 16-year-old kid gets a gun and he kills a man who's a deputy sheriff. And so it's a dead cop in a small town, and no lawyer wants that case. I know from experience, when there's a horrible crime in a small town, without a public defender's office, the judge appoints local counsel, and most lawyers run from those cases. And so Jake doesn't want this case. He doesn't want the baggage. And the Judge Noose, same judge from A Time to Kill, sort of forces him to take the case. He doesn't want it, but he gets shoved into it. And when he does, the town just turns against him. And it's his hometown. And he went from being a hero in A Time to Kill to 5 years later being very much disliked by his townsfolk. It all comes down to the big murder trial, the murder trial of the 16-year-old kid, capital murder for killing a deputy. And that's all I can tell you right now. Buy the book.
I guess follow-up question to that, and I presume that is likely to become a movie?
Oh, I have no idea. I have not had a feature film made in 15 years. So I've given up trying to predict, what's gonna make it to film. I would love for all of my books to be adapted into really good movies. I mean, look at how lucky I've been with movies. I've had The Firm, Pelican Brief, Time to Kill with Matthew, Rainmaker with the young Matt Damon, Tom Cruise in The Firm, Julia Roberts in Pelican Brief. I've been really lucky with Hollywood, and I've had 9 books adapted. And I enjoyed watching all the films. Matthew can tell you, I didn't get involved in the filming of A Time to Kill.
No,
I don't know how to make movies. Okay, I'm not going to learn. That's somebody else's business. But what I do, I sell the film rights to people I know and trust, and let them do their job. And I stay out of the way. I've never criticized a movie I didn't like, one of mine. I just don't believe if you don't want to play that game and play it the way that they make the movie, don't sell the film rights. Nobody forces me to sell the film rights. It's going to be something different from what I wrote, and that's fine. I love seeing somebody else's version of what I wrote. It's enjoyable. So I've given up trying to predict what might get filmed. So I don't know. I would love to see it filmed.
If it does, Matthew, is that a role you might be interested in?
Well, it's worth serious consideration. I mean, the idea of, stepping back into Jake Regance's shoes is very exciting. And I like the book, and I like the take on, it's another take on what I was saying earlier. Understand the prosecution side, it'll reveal more about your defense and vice versa. It's definitely something worth real consideration. On that note, I was going to ask you, John, A Time to Kill, A Time for Mercy. Obviously, these are, ecclesiastical proverbs. Right. Are in A Time to Kill and in this, are these your personal moral stances that you believe that was a time to kill and this is a time for mercy in this particular case, or are you just putting up hey, this is a truth of this situation? This is a truth.
Matthew, that's a very tough question, and I didn't answer the question in A Time for Mercy. The question is, what is our system supposed to do with a 16-year-old kid? The story takes place in 1990. In 1990, in most death states in America, they still would put a 16-year-old kid on trial for capital murder with the death penalty in play. You can't do that anymore. Supreme Court ruled about 10 years ago you cannot try a juvenile for capital murder. Okay, so that's no longer possible. You cannot sentence a juvenile to life without parole because that's a death sentence. So those 2 Supreme Court decisions changed the law. The story takes place before that happened. So what are you supposed to do with a 15, 16-year-old kid who fires a gun and kills somebody? The person's just as dead, regardless of how old the gunman was. I mean, what's the proper punishment for a 16-year-old kid who made a choice to pull the trigger? And I don't know. You can't let them. You can't try them as juveniles, and because if you do, you lose jurisdiction after 2 years. They become 18 at that point in Mississippi and in most states. At that point, they're no longer under the jurisdiction of youth court, and they're set free. Well, that's not a good punishment for somebody who pulls a trigger. So I didn't answer the question with the novel, and the readers may be disappointed with the outcome, but I still don't know what that answer is. I think some states allow a juvenile convicted of murder, once they turn 18, There's another step where they move up to maybe the adult court, and then they're sentenced some other way. I don't know. I didn't get into that, but sure, your own morals will always come across in what you write. When I wrote A Time to Kill, I believed in the death penalty. And there's a scene where Jake is talking to his law clerk who's opposed to the death penalty. And Jake makes a very strong argument in favor of the death penalty. That's the way I was raised. I was raised in that deep South, Southern Baptist, we love the death penalty culture, just like you, Matthew, in Texas. That's the way it still is down there. The majority of the people really support the death penalty. I never thought about it, really. I just believed it. I supported it until I wrote a book called The Chamber, and I went to death row and spent time on death row and realized what the killing was supposed to be doing. And I flipped 180 and I said, this is not right. This is not, as Christian people, we should not be killing people. If killing is wrong, and we all can agree it is, why is the state allowed to kill? So I went through that process after I published A Time to Kill. So I've changed a lot of my beliefs over the years. As we all do as human beings. Yeah. You write about it in your book. You look back on some of the things you believed when you were 17. You're embarrassed by now. Well, that's life. We live and learn and mature, and we change.
Yep.
Next question, Matthew. Tell us about the role that won you the Oscar, and also that feeling and the experience of winning an Academy Award.
That was Ron Woodruff in the film Dallas Buyers Club. I had read that script probably 5 years before we made it. I'd attached myself to it. I wanted to get it made. I figured it would have its day. It was definitely not going to have its day at that time. Nobody was interested in financing a period age drama, especially with Matthew McConaughey in the lead at that time. You got to remember, I was just coming off of a time where I had been heavy romantic comedies, and a lot of my sort of how I was perceived in the industry at that time was McConaughey's the rom-com guy who's shirtless on the beach. And I raised my hand many times like, yeah, and those rom-coms are paying the rent at the place on the beach where I can go shirtless. Thank you. I'm enjoying this. And I enjoyed the rom-coms. But I did notice that those roles that I was wanting to do, for instance, if A Time to Kill would have showed up at that point, I would not have been, in the industry's eyes, a good idea or a top of the line idea to go take the role of Jake Brigance at that time. Well, it was like that for all dramas. So everything I wanted to do really wasn't coming to me. So I took time off and stopped doing what I was doing, which was rom-coms. I had a 20-month dry period where I moved down to Texas and got nothing, offered nothing. After 20 months, all of a sudden being away, not seeing me on the beach, there's no beaches in Austin, Texas, and I wasn't doing the rom-coms. All of a sudden it was, where's McConaughey? And what happens when you're gone a while? For me, what happened was, it'd be a new good idea for Killer Joe, for Magic Mike, for Mud, for True Detective, for this movie that he's attached to, Dallas Buyers Club. Well, now we might have enough steam to maybe get this thing made. Still had a very low budget. Found a director. There were still many directors who did not want to make it with me, but I remember I had control of it for over 5 years. And many people tried to take the script from me. Either other directors wanted to direct it with somebody else in the lead, or other actors wanted to get it. And I was fervent about hanging on to it. I was like, no, this will have its day with me in this role, in this story. Found Jean-Marc Vallée, worked up some money, not enough money, but enough to say, I'll meet you there on day one to go start shooting this thing. We shot it in, I think, 25 days for just under 4.9 million, I believe. It worked. It was a riveting story. It was a wonderful role where I was allowed to, the ceiling and the basement of my own emotions were limitless with a role like that. It's a man doing whatever he can to survive, literally survive, stay alive, in Ron Woodruff, and helping out actually a lot of people along the way, and being a trailblazer and breaking new ground along the way. We did the film. It worked. I think it speaks for itself. I got nominated for Best Actor. I had won a few on the line leading up to the Academy Awards. I remember sitting there that night in the Academy Awards, and it got to the category, and I remember just going, you start to feel a little bit numb. And I remember just looking up at all the names, and I was like, well, mine's the only one that starts with an M, Matthew. And I said, I'm just gonna lay my head back and hopefully see if I can hear a M. And the winner is M. And I heard a M. And as I heard a M, my mom hops up, Camila hops up, everyone hopped up and screamed. And I realized they had called my name. Wonderful moment for me. I will not say it was surreal because I really felt every bit of it. And to hear that to be recognized by my peers saying, hey, we deem your work absolutely excellent. That meant for me, I remember going, I translated. My work translated. People saw themselves in my work. We told the right, they saw a story. They understood Ron Woodruff. They understood the plight of a lot of different people with HIV and where that's gone over the course of time. It translated in a really truthful and really awesome way. That felt great. That felt like it was a wonderful feeling to have my peers, say we deem your work excellent, and it did translate. Then I got up there and said some things that I've never watched my speech before since, but said some things I was thankful for, and one of the great lessons, John, I think you'll dig this. What we try to teach our kids is some things about delayed gratification. And I remember my kids going, it was a real teaching lesson for me, because kids going, what's that trophy for? What's that trophy for? And he said, you remember a year and a half ago when we were in New Orleans and you get up every morning, Popeye, me was gone, and I'd get home at night, we'd have a little dinner, and I'd tuck you in. And remember you all said my neck, I looked like I was a giraffe. They're like, yeah, we remember that. I was like, what I was doing every day when I was gone for those 30 days of working, a year and a half later, people recognized me as saying the work you did back then was excellent. So I remember teaching the kids getting them at, you can do something today and get rewarded tomorrow. That the choices we make today are compounding assets in our future. They can be. And I remember it being a really cool teaching lesson that they seemed to click on and go, oh, okay, I can build towards something that can be rewarded. I can be rewarded for later.
Speaking of little trophies, real briefly, tell us about Little Mr. Texas.
So in 1977, I'm 8 years old. Mom enters me, takes me down to Bandera, Texas to enter me in the Little Mr. Texas contest. I get up on stage, I walk out on a horse, I got my vest, I answer a few questions about 4-H and cows and cattle and how I'm going to be cowboy, yes ma'am, gentlemen, all that stuff. A few other contestants do it. It's over. I win a trophy. I kind of forgot about it, but I did win the trophy. But my mom frames this picture of me holding that trophy there and my cowboy hat and my vest, and she hangs it up in the kitchen. And every morning from then on, I'd come to breakfast. She'd say, look up there on the wall. There, look at you, Little Mr. Texas. Little Mr. Texas. You are Little Mr. Texas, the winner. Well, I go through this for years. I'm Little Mr. Texas. There it is. I'm there with the trophy. I won. Just a couple years ago, now that was 1977, just a couple years ago, I find that picture. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, look at me, Little Mr. Texas. And I look down at the little engraved plate on the trophy, and I go, wait a minute, what's it saying? I zoom in on the picture, and it says runner up. And I call Mom, and I go, Mom, I wasn't Little Mr. Texas, I was runner up. And she goes, no, you're Little Mr. Texas. I go, what do you mean? It says runner up. She goes, no, that other guy, he had too much money and his parents bought him too nice of a suit. They cheated. You're Little Mr. Texas. And I remember laughing, going, where would I be if I thought I was runner up instead of Little Mr. Texas? Would I still be here?
And
so I was runner up at Little Mr. Texas, 1977. But raised to believe that I was.
And final question. So what's your reaction to Matt Damon's impersonations of you?
What's mine?
Yeah.
He does a good impersonation of me. I've always kind of laughed and taken it as somewhat of a compliment. He does a damn good impersonation. He had done one, and then somebody that was close to him came and asked me one time, "Hey, are you okay?" He does impersonation. I was like, "Oh, hell yeah." He does it. As long as anybody, I'm fine with any impersonation of me. Just make sure it's a good one. And he does a good one. He's pretty damn good at it.
But a lot of fun to talk to you guys, especially you, Matthew.
Good to talk to you, John. Good to catch up.
Keep in touch, man.
It's been great having both of you at Live Talks Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Matthew's memoir is Greenlights. John's new novel is A Time for Mercy. And they are both available wherever books are sold.